Do whatever the Hyundai you want.
Hey, I'm Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
G'day, I'm Marcus Ambrose.
Hey, this is Kenny Rose, and you're listening to the
Fuel Pod.
This podcast covers all things motorsports. It's unfiltered, it's unmasked, and...
Ooh, we're going crazy. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 65 of the Fuel Pod on what has been an incredibly exhausting week. So bear with me tonight as we get through everything that happened this past week. Thank God we had an F1 race this past weekend, albeit a wet one. Lots of rain. And then we'll also be talking about the upcoming Italian Grand Prix at Monza at the Temple of Speed. And then we'll cover a little bit of NASCAR because it was kind of a big weekend for them as well. And then we'll call it a night. We'll do some podiums and rip from the paddock as typical, but still, let's get through it. So I think the first piece of information we need to cover is just the practice sessions. I think all of the Formula One teams saw it coming with the rain during the practice sessions. At one point, Oscar Piastri spun out into the gravel just as Danny Ricciardo was coming around the same turn and saw him there, held onto the wheel, spun out, hit the wall, ended up breaking his hand. Anybody that's watched Drive to Survive or knows anything about Danny Ricciardo, he's very proud of all of his tattoos, but he's always proud of, quote unquote, getting work done. But some of his tweets after that were talking about getting metal work done because he had to go see a surgeon. I guess they put some metal in his hand, so I guess that technically makes him the first cybernetic Formula One driver, but we'll see how it goes. Not expected to return again this week. Liam Lawson will be in that AlphaTauri again. Danny will be making his return supposedly at Singapore, which I don't know how you guys feel about that if you're a Formula One fan, but first race back, broken hand, just had surgery. I don't know. I don't know if Singapore is the race I would choose. I realize it's probably a time situation. Yes, it was a wet and wild one. Redbeard, Redbeard's a good buddy of mine, and we watched the race together. And that was one of the things he was asking me was, have you ever seen a multiple, wet weather situation in a Formula One race? And I have. Never more than twice. I mean, I've seen it where it rained from beginning to end, but this was, one of the few that I've seen where it was two very distinct wet weather segments, which made the race crazy from more than just a racing standpoint, but also from a strategy standpoint. So let's move into the race. So Max Verstappen is on the pole, shocker. Lando was in P2. The race started in rain. In fact, the formation lap, the rain has started during the formation lap. So they come around to start finish. They go into turn one, and this is where Fernando Alonso really showed that his age is just a number, but it also adds up to his experience level because he gained 3 spots in sector 1. So started out, I think, P5. He was in third after like turn 1 or 2. And then eventually in second. So really, really good race for him. He really kind of put on a wet weather masterclass as far as how to drive. Not so much from a pit stop standpoint, but that's not his fault, and we'll get to that shortly. I'm trying not to get mad right now. So anyway, other people that had what I think is a wonderful day, I think Sainz had one of the most kind of underrated, unsung great days. He kept that Ferrari in it. Leclerc, of course, retired at some point with some damage. But, Sainz had a wonderful drive, super fast in certain areas where the Ferrari was expected to be fast. Showed excellent mastery of wet weather. Of course, he's always been kind of that guy, but I think he gets that genetically from his dad. At the end of lap 1, and this is what killed me the most, even the announcers. So we had DC, David Coulthard, Julian Palmer, and Alex Jakes calling the race. All of them. I think it was Julian Palmer who said, he's like, that rain is really just chucking it down out there. They're all going to dive into pits. Well, only 7 out of 20 cars dove into the pits to get intermediates, which kind of blew my mind. I thought more people would do it. I really thought Max would kind of lead that charge, but he stayed out there. Alonso stayed out there. A lot of guys stayed out there. But then, of course, they came in on lap 2, and that's where the pit stop debacle started. And, okay, I'm going to get to that in a second because, yeah, I want to stay with just the race part first. So other people that had some wonderful drives that I think Alex Albon got a lot of credit for his drive. And, man, that guy's just been tearing it up lately in a car. I mean, folks, it's a Williams. I don't know what to say. Maybe they're around the bend, but that car is so super fast in flat out stretches, which is going to really favor them this week. And we'll get to Monza in a little bit. But other people that had wonderful drives, Pierre Gasly, who ended up on the podium, of course, just another day. And he even had a penalty at some point, I think, for speeding in the pit lane, and still ended up on the podium. And that Alpine kind of showed its sea legs, pardon the pun, on straight stretches as well, and seemed to be fairly maneuverable in some of the braking zones. So, I don't know if Alpine's on the up and up. There's a lot of turmoil on that team right now. So hopefully, we'll see some more of that coming up this weekend, and maybe Ocon will enter the fray as well. So we had a huge dry section of the race. Well, I mean, it dried a little bit. But lap 62 of 72, we got, and if you'd have heard the onboard audio from some of the race engineers going, hey, we've got rain coming in a couple of minutes off the coast. It's going to be heavier than anything else we've seen. And, man, they were not kidding. I mean, it came down. Thought for sure everybody was going to be on full wets, but nope. They were on intermediates, except for, I think, one driver was on all wets. So, really interesting. Of course, Max Verstappen ends up pulling this race out again. Never really in any kind of, chance of him losing it. So, final podium was Verstappen, Alonso, Gasly, which if you've been following the Fuel Pod on and doing the Let's Play, on the F1 Let's Play, I think I got 3 out of 10 this week and came in first place on my predictions. So 3 out of 10 is not good. So it was kind of a crazy race. It was really hard to call. But let's talk about, let's go ahead and get this over with so I can get my unstable mangina figured out on this pit stop situation. So to call pit stops a debacle would probably be an insult to debacles everywhere. The first one I want to talk about is Alonso comes in. It's an 8.06 second pit stop, if I'm not mistaken. Guy comes out with the front right tire, drops it, picks it up, drops it again. I mean, I realize it's wet, but come on, dude, you guys got to practice for stuff like this. There's no way they don't train for this. Can't get the tire on. They get it on finally. It's 8 seconds. Alonso comes back out. He should have been right back in second. Comes out in fifth. Luckily, it's Fernando Alonso, so he got his spots back and ended up P2. Okay, that's fine. Then they decide to bring in Charles Leclerc. And there's a great picture floating around the internet. I got it sent to me on my phone and wasn't able to get it uploaded for this broadcast tonight. Sorry, super busy. But there's a great shot of him as he's entering his pit box. The entire pit crew is standing around his car as it's entering the pit box. And I forwarded that picture to another friend of mine. And I was like, "Hey, what's missing from this?" And he was like, immediately was like, "No tires." They literally did not have tires in their hands. When's the last time you seen an F1 pit stop where they didn't change tires? Never. You never see that, unless it's straight up serving a penalty, and that doesn't really count as a pit stop. So they come in, they have no tires. They have to go in and get the tires out of the garage. They're coming out, they're fumbling tires, they're tripping over each other trying to get these things on. It was a complete mess, and I'm kind of glad I didn't have the picture because it was Ferrari, and it's embarrassing enough as a Ferrari fan to see something like that. But it's always them, and it drives me completely batty. You got one fucking job to do: bring the tires to the car. And I realize they have more than one job to do, but in that instance, they have one job to do: bring the tires to the car. Last year, they brought 3 when a car has 4 tires on it. And this time, they brought none to a car that has 4 tires on it. And Diddy, I know you're listening. He sent me the original picture with it on there. And he looked, just trying to judge tone on a text message is hard anyway. But I could literally tell he was pissed. And I was kind of freaking out about it because it drove me nuts. But they've got to do a better job at planning or training for crazy situations that are outside the normal, and they obviously hadn't, and so it was kind of a mess. So not real happy about it. It's a very, very good point. So Diddy says, "Why go at all? Why even get out of your little folding chair outside the your Netflix camera, showing you just sitting there chilling, and why even come out there and stand in the rain? If you're not going to do something." I realized he also had a front wing replacement, and I'm assuming that was the same pit stop based on that picture. But seriously, 2 things: 1, bring your tires, and 2, know which tires you're supposed to bring. Because I'm pretty sure I saw another car come in where they thought it was going to be one set of tires, and they had to run back and get a different set of tires. But I was so pissed off at that point that I just couldn't even see straight, and I was trying to focus on stuff going on the track. So anyway, absolutely nuts. Hold on just a second. I'm going to try to get this. Ooh, I don't know if I can. Hold on. I'm trying to get somebody else in here, possibly, if we can. I don't know if I can or not, and hopefully you guys can still see me. So anyway, it was a crazy race. I really enjoyed the whole thing. Kudos to Max Verstappen, who won his 9th race in a row, which tied Alberto Ascari and Sebastian Vettel. So as we move into our Monza coverage here in a little bit, we'll be able to talk about that some more, because it is a huge thing, and we'll see how it goes. So moving on, let's talk about Rip from the Paddock. These are, of course, articles that I pull off of various F1 news sources and don't actually read the article. It's kind of some hanging curveballs on this one tonight, because there just wasn't much going around that hasn't been so overly discussed that everybody has their opinion on it. But the first one is why Mercedes opted to stick with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell for the next 2 years. If you don't know, Lewis Hamilton finally signed a new 2-year contract. And this is a huge deal, because I think a lot of what was going to make silly season is now out, now that we know Lewis Hamilton is still going to be there. They acted like the Russell part of it was a big deal too, but I think everybody knew George Russell was going to stay at Mercedes. So why would Mercedes opt to stick with these guys? Well, easy. Stability. You've been working on this car and making it better, or at least trying to make it better, and it started out a complete shit show. And you've had the same, 2 drivers. You want to keep those guys, because that way you get consistency in your feedback on your equipment. Plus, not for nothing, but one's a 7-time world champ, and George Russell's no slouch behind the wheel either. I'm not a huge fan, but he knows how to drive a car. He got kind of hosed this weekend. He thought he had a podium car, and he finished dead last if you take out the DNFs. So, anywho, I think that's why you keep those 2. If you got different comments, hit us up on Twitter or light me up on here in the message board and let me know. Number 2, it's not that they have a magic bullet, says Frederick Vassar, as he outlines what it will take to reel in Red Bull over the second half of the season. Well, Fred, I got to ask you, are you talking about what it will take Ferrari to reel in Red Bull? Because that'll be a miracle. If you're talking about any of the other teams, I still think it's completely. I do think they have a magic bullet. I think they have a magic bullet that you guys can't seem to find out there anywhere. I think a lot of it has to do, obviously, with Adrian Newey. That guy is a car genius, just in everything he does. And unless you guys can clone him, I really have a hard time believing that you guys are going to catch those guys. Fred, if it was anybody, I would hope it was you, man. I would hope that you guys can. And you got a good car. You just got to keep it on the track, and you got to quit making screwball mistakes in pit lane and strategy calls, because some of those are just absolutely perplexing when you're watching a race. But I do look forward to seeing if anybody can even get close. I'd rather them not run the table this year. But, then again, part of me is like, man, nobody's ever done that. So that would be cool too, to see it in my lifetime at least. So anyway, that's where we are with that. And the third one is Logan Sargent is under pressure at Monza, as this is his best chance to shine and retain his seat in 2024. I don't know what that article said, but I absolutely agree with that statement, and I'm going to tell you why. Because he's under pressure every week. And why is Monza his best chance to shine? Well, I'm not saying it's the easiest track on the calendar. It's the fastest track on the calendar. Usually what that means is there's a lot less braking, which means hard turning and technical sections. And, Monza's got some sections that can be rough if you're not focused, but it is a track where I think you can excel if you have a good car. Now, Albon's already proved that Williams car is fast. So, that's not the situation. So Logan just has to overcome, whatever it is that's causing him to, because it really looked like a focus thing this week. He obviously was a DNF. He slid off. He hit the wall, tore the car up. He was visibly pissed. Looked like he sat in a trackside shed for Lord knows how long. It was 30 or 40 laps. He was just still sitting there. At least they could have done is bring him some gelato or something so he could chill out or something to drink. But it looked like he was just sitting there completely lost. I want him to succeed because he's an American and I'm an American, and I would like to see him succeed. But F1 is one of the most performance-driven sports there is. You're by yourself as far as a driver goes while you're in the car. You can't really blame anything on the track on anybody else if you have the right equipment. And I think Alex Albon is unfortunately creating a monster that Logan Sargent can't fight, which is great for Alex. It really is really good for him considering where he came from and what's happened to him so far in his career, but bad for Logan Sargent. So Logan, man, I hope you do turn it around. I hope we have seen some small signs of you doing better, but I hope you can turn it around at Monza. It's a great place to do it. And that's it from the paddock for tonight. But next up, we have probably one of my second or two favorite races on the calendar, which is going to be Monza. One of the unwritten majors in Formula One, iconic track, home of Ferrari, as far as the Ferrari home race, if you will. And let's go ahead and pull up some really, really incredible circuit. It's changed over many years, but this is basically its current setup. If you're looking at the bottom of the diagram there, that's the start finish line you'll see there on the bottom straight. So we'll be moving from right to left across your screen. As you can see, it is an incredibly fast course. You don't see first turn there is a really, really super tight chicane, and it's going to be even slower as they come through on successive laps. But then they've got a huge sweeping right turn into another chicane, which, the De La Roja is it's not horribly bad as long as you plan slow in, fast out, and get out of there. You got the two Delesmos, which are not really bad turns. The second one's a little bit harder braking than the first. Another long, huge straight into a Scari, and then another flat into the Parabolica. So really incredible track. Really incredible track, and super fast. You'll see some consistent 200 plus mile an hour um, speeds coming out of these cars. I expect any of the cars that are set up for straight line speed, really high downforce, are going to do very well here, as long as the driver stays on their toes. So this is Monza. So just to give you an idea, this is the first turn at Monza. I decided to pull this one off tonight, courtesy of Google Earth. But it from right to left again, if you're looking at the diagram. The first time they go through this turn, it's not as slow because, I mean, literally the start finish line is not very far to the right behind this diagram. But man, the second time they come through here and every time after that, they're going to be flying. I mean, they're going to be cooking. And you're looking at a braking zone at probably the 150 meter mark before they even get there. This is also the spot where we saw Verstappen drive over the top of Hamilton's car a couple years ago. So it can be dangerous. You can get some overtakes in here. So if you do some good late braking, or you're able to carry some throttle through that first part into the second part, then you can definitely get an inside overtake on this. But definitely a very unique first turn. The other thing I want to talk about, there's a couple new liveries this weekend, and one of them I thought was really good, and one of them's kind of embarrassing. So let's go ahead and move into that. So this will be the Alfa Romeo livery, and say whatever you want about Alfa Romeo, but they always have a pretty car. And this is their livery for Monza this weekend, which I think is beautiful, working in the Italian flag. And I always called this car the pizza box car because it always looks like you're getting, pizza delivered to your house. A lot more black on this version than on their typical weekend car, but I think it really makes the Italian flag pop. So really good job. Hats off to Alfa Romeo for coming up with this one. Not so much hats off for this one, though. This is the Ferrari livery this weekend. Yeah, it's sharp, but if you know what it is, then you're going to see Ferrari has always been more about the brand than any specific race series. If you follow other forms of racing, you know that they won the 24-hour Le Mans in their first time back in 50 years in their hypercar this year. This is the livery from the Le Mans hypercar on an F1 car, which that part of it's cool. I get that. But, it's basically a slap in the face of the F1 team saying, hey, we won. So maybe if we put our colors on your car, maybe you can win. I don't think that's true, but here we are. So that's what they're running this weekend. I mean, it's not that ugly. I mean, I get it. But like I said, it's kind of embarrassing. So, I hope they're able to do something with it this weekend. If they win this weekend, that would be wonderful. I think one of their drivers has a good chance. I don't think the other one does, and we'll get to that shortly. So let's talk about, while we're on the subject of the Italian Grand Prix, let's talk about some predictions. I definitely think Max Verstappen's going to win this race again. That Red Bull, there's so many flat out sections on this track. It's going to be, anybody's going to be hard pressed to even catch them. I'm looking probably 22, 25 second win for Max this weekend on this track. Second place, I'm going to go with Alonso and Sainz for P3 probably. And why Sainz and not Leclerc? I think Leclerc's got the yips. If you're a baseball fan, you know what the yips are. I really think right now he's suffering from the yips, and I think Sainz is outperforming him just across the board. But I look forward to Sainz trying to get up there with Alonso because those two are rivals, and Sainz's childhood hero was Fernando Alonso, so he's always trying to surpass him. So I look forward to those two chasing each other around the track. I know the F1 TV crew, a lot of them think Lewis Hamilton's coming in P2 this weekend. Is it possible? Sure. Any given Sunday for sure. But I don't think it'll happen. But the other person I want everybody to watch out for this weekend is Alex Albon. And I'm going to tell you why. And we've alluded to it for a few weeks. I know last time Farmer was on here, we did. But that Williams car, and please understand how much it pains me to have to say this because I am not a Williams fan. That Williams car is, I mean, lights out fast on straight sections, on just straight line speed. And there's a lot of those to be had at Monza. So can he spoil? He can't spoil Verstappen. Can he spoil P2 or P3? Absolutely. Pierre Gasly seems like a man on a mission. So, and that car's good. And the Alpine is very good in straight line speed as well. So I look forward to any of those guys. As far as who's going to have good drives, I think Yuki will have another good drive here. He's really, for driving that car, that AT04 Alpha Tauri, he is really showing his chops this year. And I think he'll have a decent drive and probably do as expected or better than expected. McLaren, and I look forward to seeing both of them up there, Lando and Piastri. You could probably see a P5, P6, or P5, P7 out of McLaren this weekend. But my pick for the podium is definitely going to be Verstappen, Alonso, Carlos Sainz / spoiler Albon. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so back on this side of the pond, this weekend in a small town called Daytona Beach, Florida, there was a NASCAR race. And it wasn't obviously the 500, but it was the Coca-Cola 0 to Hero 5 or 600, whichever one it was. But the important thing is that this was the race that determined the last position in the playoffs. Now, going into this, Bubba Wallace had a 32-point lead and holding on to that 16th spot. Coming out of this race, Bubba Wallace has the 16th playoff spot, and the other 16 guys are going to the house with no playoffs. So, it is what it is. I'll talk about it more when I get to my podiums, but, my hat's off to 2311 and Bubba Wallace for holding that spot. Probably the most interesting feature, because when you're talking about Daytona and modern NASCAR, it's straight pack racing. And I mean, it was just trying to figure out which line was fastest. One thing that just kills me more and more the faster and better these cars get, though, is that anytime you see anybody drop off the draft, I mean, they literally fall like a rock. I mean, they fall like a rock. It looks like when they pull into there was a couple times drivers got shoved into the middle, and that was it, man. They'd slide back 12, 15 spots before anybody knew what happened. But the big one of the night was when Ryan Preece got spun out and drove into the infield and flipped his car like 4,850 times. It was the craziest shit I ever seen. You literally saw his windscreen pop off, his window net pop off at some point. I don't know what you do in that point besides just put your arms on your chest and cross them and pray to God. But obviously he's okay. But it was a hell of a roll. I mean, it was a good 10, 12 times spinning that car, and it was airborne. And it was, if it was a skateboard or a snowboard, it was a gold medal run on flips for sure. But, hats off to that team for recovering their driver and living to fight another day. So anyway, that's that. And lastly, on the Fuel Pod news, before I move into my podiums and back markers tonight, is I went to see, I have two boys, and one is 17 and one is 14. And one of them loves racing and just absolutely loves just cars in general. Big fan of motorsports. Shocker. The other one, not the biggest fan, although I found out later he likes racing a little more than he told me about. But they ended up both going to see the Gran Turismo movie with me. Gran Turismo, obviously a game for the PlayStation, has been out for 25 years in various iterations by Polyphony Digital. And you get to be my age and you've played all of them, for the entire 25-year run of this game series. It's important to note, though, that this movie is not a video game movie. This movie is more of a biopic of a guy named Jan Mardenborough, who was a kid at the time that got picked up. Somebody at Nissan had a crazy idea about taking the best sim racers in the world and putting them in a competition, and then the winner would get to drive real race cars. And Jan Martinborough won it, and is still a racer to this day. I think this was like 2008 or 8. I don't know if it was 8 or 18. Anyway, folks, if you haven't seen the movie and you're a fan of racing or motorsports or just really good, small town kid made it in the world kind of stories, this was an excellent movie. I definitely agree with Diddy's appraisal of this movie. It was very good. I will say this: they kind of played Mary Hobb a little bit with some of the rules, and I know they did it for dramatic effect for some of the races. It's important to know it's a true story. There's a few fictional characters that I'm sure were created for dramatic purposes, but as a person that has loved any movie that's involved with the 24-hour Le Mans, Ford versus Ferrari of recent note was one of the best ones. But as far as showing the driver and internal team perspective at the 24-hour Le Mans, this movie did an excellent job. It didn't show the drivers completely crashed out, which kind of bugged me. It just kind of showed them sitting in chairs waiting for their turn to drive. But it kind of really captured the essence of that race and, did it with a story to tell. And if you have not seen it, get a chance to go see it on the big screen before it goes off the movies. I think it was the #1 movie in America this week. So excellent thing. But like I said, whether you played the game or not doesn't really matter at all. Just a really good, wholesome family movie, really. So it plays on the drama with the kid's family too, of him wanting to do this, and it'll hit you. There's a couple scenes in there that'll hit you right in the feels. I promise you. Digimon Hansu played Jan's dad and did an excellent job. David Harbour, if you're a Stranger Things fan or Newsroom or Hellboy or anything else David Harbour has done, I mean, he absolutely stole this movie. So hats off to him. Hats off to Orlando Bloom for playing the kind of greasy corporate guy but he was the one that got things done. So hats off to them. And of course, hats off to Kazunori Yamauchi, who created Gran Turismo and was every part the technical advisor on this movie, and Neil Blomkamp, who directed the movie as well. He captured the essence of the game while still creating a wonderful movie. So take your kids, take your race fan buddies, take whoever, and go see it when you get a chance. So really, really good movie. And folks, let's move into the podiums. Let's hope the music doesn't kill it this week. Tried to keep it down. For this week. I normally don't put him, no matter where he finishes, I normally don't put him first, but I have to this week, and that's Max Verstappen. 9 race wins in a row is no small feat. Only 2 other people have done it. As I mentioned earlier, Alberto Ascari and Sebastian Vettel. He has a chance this weekend, and a good chance, probably a 99% chance to be the first guy to go 10 wins in a row. And again, I'd like to see it, I guess. I'm kind of hard-pressed on choosing that, but it'll be something cool to know and see. Second was Fernando Alonso for putting on an absolute wet weather masterclass. I think of a few drivers that do very well in the rain. Hulkenberg also comes to mind, being a German and driving in lots of rain. But he did an absolute wonderful job, and he drove slick tires in wet weather, and that's not easy to do, so hats off to him. And third, Bubba Wallace. And I'm going to tell you why, because I guarantee you 85% of NASCAR Nation going into this race did not expect him to retain that spot. But he did. And it was not easy to do. The very guy that was right under him in the standings had a couple different chances to take him out. And I don't mean take him out like take him out of the race. I mean take him out score-wise to get in the playoffs. And, of course, any of the other 16 drivers, if they could have won the race, would have just got in by default. So hats off to him and his team at 23XI. Of course, Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan. So good job there, and good luck in the playoffs. And that is my podium. back markers. It's kind of tough for me because a lot of times I don't like picking back markers unless it's just obvious, and I don't have a Nicholas Latifi to pick on anymore, and I don't have a Nick DeVries to pick on anymore. So my first one is Logan Sargent. I really think it was just kind of a loss of focus this past week that led to his spin out in a time when he can't afford to make rookie mistakes as a rookie, and that's unfortunate, but that's just the way that business is. To DNF on a weekend when he really needed performance, especially when Albin did so well. Number 2 is Lando because he started P2 on that race, and yes, the rain was coming down, but I think he showed his youth because the first 2 people to come up on him were Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz, who has a few years racing on Lando as well. So I don't know what happened. I don't think it was the car. I really think he probably just antsy being in the rain and didn't really want it. So anyway, he was my number 2, and my number 3 was George Russell. And some of this is complete supposition, but at one point during the race, he came on team audio and he said, we need to figure out what happened. We were a projected podium finish and we need to know what happened. And obviously at this point, I think he'd fallen to 17th, and then he'd gotten back up to 12. He had gotten back up to P12 at some point. But then this is the part I'm saying might be complete supposition. It looked like he just gave up. Fell to P17, which for this race was last place because 18 and 19 and 20 were DNFs. So anywho, it is what it is, but those are my 3 back markers for this week. And folks, that makes it a night for me. Make sure to follow and subscribe to us on YouTube. Hopefully we'll have Farmer, maybe Diddy on here at some point one week, and I won't be one man all alone. But here we are. So I'm on Twitter at jneil729, same with Twitch. And of course, this is the Fuel Pod on YouTube. But thanks for being here tonight. Make sure you watch the Italian Grand Prix this weekend. It should be pretty good. Should be fairly entertaining, especially with the amount of speed they're going to be reaching there. And you guys have a great rest of your week and a wonderful Labor Day weekend. I'm going to enjoy my day off, that's for sure. And I'll see you guys next week, and we'll talk about what happened at Monza later on. Thank you.